Turkey and the moves on the part of, on the one hand, prosecutors in an ever-widening graft probe, and on the other hand, the Prime Minister of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has dismissed or transferred more than 1,000 police, judges, and prosecutors since that probe began, or since that probe went public, shall we say, on December the 17th. With us to talk about it, he's in London, academic and author Ziya Maral. Over in Brussels, we are joined by Bahadir Kaliagasi of the Turkish Business and Industry Organization TÜSİAD. Welcome back as well to Emre Demir of the Zaman France, the French edition of the newspaper. And we're also joined by Benjamin Bruce of the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. We were talking before the break on how, on the one hand, we're seeing every day new surprises. We're also seeing a rising level of rhetoric on this issue. The European Commission weighing in this Wednesday, pointing the finger squarely at the Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
The recent steps in Turkey, whether it's the removal, reassignment or dismissal of police officers and investigators, are a matter of concern for the European Commission. These steps could undermine the current investigations and the capacity of the legal system and the police to investigate matters in an independent manner.
Ziya Maral, how's that going to go down in Ankara?
It won't go well at all. In fact, even the new Turkey's EU minister, pretty much the second day in office, has already come out and condemned the statements made by European Union officials. And the argument which Turkey uses is that the EU should not interfere in Turkish politics, which is a categorical fallacy because we are an EU candidate country. We are in the process of aligning ourselves with EU standards, and we are trying to integrate into European Union. So we have no luxury of actually turning a blind eye and a closed ear to comments made by European Commission.
Bahadir Kaliagasi, do you agree?
Yes, the European Union for a long time played a role transforming Turkey with a policy of carrot and stick. But in the last 5 years, unfortunately, the carrot was not anymore tasty and the stick was not hurting. The European Union has been losing the power of its conditionality on Turkey. Most of the chapters of negotiations are blocked by a disproportionate problem, which is the Cyprus problem, and the blocking of so many chapters of the European Union with its most important accession country, Turkey. In this global context, it's not rational at all. And the European Union, the past experience of the EU policies on Turkey are very clear. More Europe in Turkey triggers more democracy, more rule of law, more economic growth and social growth, and everything from the environmental policies to consumer rights and to social standards. Turkey has been making progress, also thanks to the EU process. Now the EU has been blocking its own relations with Turkey because of a relatively small problem, and this is very irrational. And on the other hand, EU has been criticizing Turkey, and this is right, and EU is right to criticize Turkey on the issues of rule of law and democracy. But there are two chapters of negotiations specifically on these issues, on these fields. The chapters now which are related to the democracy, rule of law, human rights, freedoms, judiciary power. These two chapters are still blocked. So the only rational choice for the EU would be to open these chapters together with other chapters of negotiations so that once more EU can back in business of being a promoter of democracy in Turkey and Turkey's integration to the European Union. The global context on the one hand, the Europe's own problems on the other hand, justify a better policy on Turkey.
All right, and we have a comment from Dinesco saying Mr. Erdogan had a big chance to set up a model of Islamic democracy for the whole Middle East. It ended up in a war with his own people. I don't think a war is perhaps too strong a word, but Benjamin Bruce, The Turkish model that we've been talking about, and that has been really looked to as a model by a lot of countries, is it in doubt?
I have a problem still with the idea of the Turkish model, and I think that's something that maybe might be more diffuse in academic literature than in media sources, because the Turkish model, already to try to define what it is and export it, would require immense historical and cultural changes.
You remember, for instance, Erdogan's rock star welcome when he went to Cairo for a few years back.
And his rock star welcome was followed by an immense problem when he mentioned the word laïcité, or secularism, which was translated into Arabic and turned into an immense problem for him while he was speaking with the rest of the Egyptian responsible notables where he was. So the problem with this Turkish model is that it doesn't get translated one-to-one. So we can have different ideas of parties that are inspired by them. For example, the Moroccan Party of Justice and Development, which had the name already before the AKP existed, also looks to the AKP as a model. It even uses a symbol in a sense, but it operates in an entirely different context, and it's not even inspired from the same even religious or political sources that might be the case of the AKP. So with Erdogan right now, the war against his own people, I think we really have to look at the election to determine that. Because in the end, there is going to be an election, there are going to be multiple elections, and all these events that are taking place right now are immensely tied to what is going to happen at the end of March and in August.
So you're saying that these arrests, the Graft probe going public now, is politically motivated, it is tied to a political calendar?
I'm saying the reactions are. I don't know, I can't say anything about how the actual investigations have taken place. For instance, today, I think one of the best examples was with the Izmir port managers and the other investigations that took place in Van and Ankara, etc. Because there was an investigation that had started already a year or so beforehand. This had started before the Dershane problems, the preparatory schools with the Gülen movement. And so were it to be a plot, it would have started much earlier. But if it had not been, we're looking at an investigation that already has been underway for quite some time. It had started under one governor. And if it comes today to the papers as something where there are arrests made, well, the AKP's mayoral candidate today said, well, more than anything, this is curious timing. This investigation has come to light solely because it is going to have an influence on the election. What I'm saying is rather the reactions that are being taken right now are all being calculated with regard to this election, because what the AKP says right now will have an influence on its possible electorate. And if it has the ability to galvanize the public opinion in the same way that it did after the Gezi Park incidents, where you have on the one hand the undesirable Turkey, the undesirable, undemocratic old Turkish system, and then you have the new Turkish system, which the AKP still tries at least to take up the mantle, or at least portray itself in this way. Well, it has a better chance of, again, maybe getting a majority electorate, of getting over 50%, etc.
So rather than play cool, Erdogan had no choice but to react in the manner that he has.
He always has a choice, but his choice was to react obviously in a way that's characteristic to his own personality, but in a way that reduces these complex problems to the same way that we're speaking about them often in media headlines. That there is Erdogan on the one hand, and there is an undemocratic movement on the other hand. And it could be the Gülen movement, it could be the vestiges of the old deep state system, it could be anything. But if it's not the democratically elected AKP, it can be portrayed as undemocratic and against the current government.
You mentioned the vestiges of the old deep state system. Emre Demir, just a couple of days ago, the prime minister suggesting a retrial for army officers who've been convicted of coup plotting. What do you think of that timing?
Well, it's an interesting timing, and I think that
What's behind that?
Well, it's a trick, or it's a strategy that we can call the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and I think he's trying to make a political alliance with the old power structures, with the Kemalist and ultra nationalist section of the population, which both doesn't doesn't like very much the Gülen movement. He's trying, I think, to make a political alliance with others, with the other political groups, especially. But it's a strategic error for Erdogan. because for years
Do you
now.
really see that? I mean, do you honestly see Erdogan having an alliance with the Kemals, which are the old nationalists in Turkey?
Well, I don't think that it's a rational choice, but he's trying to make it now. So, a senior AKP deputy said yesterday that if there wasn't this investigation, this Graft probe, we wouldn't offer an amnesty for the Ergenekon and Balyoz convicted people. So I think that it's kind of a political alliance. It's a search of a political alliance, and I don't think that it will work. It's not credible in a sense that Erdogan had gained a legitimacy with saying that he won against the military tutelage, he won against the Turkish army, and now he's saying that it was a trap against the army, and I didn't do it. It was the Gulen movement who did all these investigations. It's not credible. We are talking about maybe the most powerful man in recent Turkish history. So I don't think that he wasn't aware or he was against this process.
Bahadir Kaliagasi, do you agree?
Well, Turkey is a pluralistic society, so I can agree with any hypothesis because they can all be relevant. In a Turkish democracy history, you will always see shifting alliances and periods of coalition government and periods of single-party government. Therefore, we have the experience of all kinds of combinations of political power in Turkey.
Even a combination combination, Bahadir, between Kemalists and Erdogan?
Kemalists, I don't think that it's a relevant political term in the context of Turkey. There is no, there are people who can be qualified as such or not, but when you see the political parties, there is a Social Democratic Party, main opposition party, there is a Nationalist Right Party, there is a Kurdish but still Social Democratic Party, and the center-right Conservative Party of Erdogan. These are the main political parties. So anything can happen. A big coalition like in Germany is again a single-party government, or opposition parties with a new government. They are all possible. The past experience, the Turkish democracy shows us that anything is possible. And that is a long experience. The Turkish, even the Ottoman Empire started to have this parliamentary democracy experience by the end of the 19th century. So Turkish people are very much keen to this kind of political debates. But what will matter is more than anything else, of course, the way, first of all, the political climate will evolve and the perception of the political climate by the people. The corruption cases are very serious. So whoever is in government today or next years, they will have to deal with the corruption issues to rebuild the public confidence on the rule of law and the judiciary system. This is very important for the citizens. This is very important for the companies. And secondly, the economy. Turkish economy has gone very far now in integrating itself to the European single market. More than 60% of the European Union's legal patrimony is already transposed to the Turkish legal order. And Turkey is already has already well multiplied, diversified its trade ties with the rest of the world, with the United States, with China, with Russia, with the Middle East, Balkans. So it's an economy which is very diversified, and in the daily life of the people, what will matter is the stability of the Turkish lira, but also the real tangible issues. New investments, technology issues, environmental issues, as we have been witnessing last summer with the Gezi movement, the youth issues. So beyond those, gangs or not gangs or parallel states or not, the Turkish citizens will probably continue to decide on the basis of the very relevant, tangible issues linked to their daily life and immediate future.
All right, growth and how it's handled. Some people saying the Western media has gotten this wrong. Sunan Gulan, writing Tuesday in the Financial Times, talks about a winner-takes-all democracy, but that's not how Time Magazine's Carl Vick sees it. It's all happening in plain view amid a tumult that can only be described as invigorating, like the street protests that erupted across Turkey over the summer, also occasioned by a real estate project. The latest crisis tests not so much Erdogan, whose vainglory appears impervious to events, but the strength of Turkish democracy, which in the space of just months shows signs of maturing. Do you agree with that, Zia Moral?
I do agree. I think the Turkish state has really did not enable a democratic maturation for pretty much 80 years now, even though technically it's been a multi-party democracy for the last few decades. This is the first time now all cohorts of Turkish public are facing a bitter reality that unless we have an objective rule of law, all of us, one way or another, will end up as victims of this machinery, because whoever gets up on top of this state structure is bound to enjoy the uncontrolled and unkept and unaccounted exercise of power. So to that extent, what we are now witnessing is first a maturation over the discussion of secularization. What does it mean to be a Muslim majority state with different interpretations of Islam and different levels of personal piety? We have seen, in fact, quite a good healthy discussion on that. Now we are witnessing a clash, not so much so between secular versus religiously conservative Turkey, but between the conservative Turkey itself, and now different groups having the desire to be the main monopoly of, if you like, of Islam or the name of Allah or the values of Islam, are now actually coming to terms that they also are now sharing a democracy, and their own future and the credibility of their message also goes through by rule of law and the protection and the respect of others as much as themselves. So in this sense, in a long run perspective, I completely agree. I think the painful process that began since 2002 can only be understood with the concept of anomy, that Turkey is reconfiguring its national narratives. Turkish public is becoming more committed to the vision of democracy and demanding more from their governments than we ever had. And I think in this process it will be turbulent, but in the long run I actually am really optimistic still about the future of Turkey rather than pessimistic.
Optimistic, but would you agree for now it's still a winner-takes-all democracy?
Not really. That's not possible. In fact, if you look at what is happening, the winner is not taking all at all. The ministers who thought they were untouchable have already been pretty much fired from their posts, not actually resigned. Same thing applies for Prime Minister Erdogan. He might have one more maximum possibility of a term as a prime minister, and that's it. In fact, even the military generals who thought they were completely untouchable have seen themselves from going in a decade feeling that they were the owners of the country to find themselves before courts and defending themselves. So in that sense, ultimately, absolute power doesn't exist. Ultimately, there is no taking all, because a country is so complicated with its realities and it's still an electoral political system. AKP might very well lose votes. At the current estimates, we do not see a major drop in their votes at all. I do not agree, for example, with the comments that they're aligning themselves with the military at all. Yet I do see new groupings among Kurds and among even other Islamists who were refusing to vote for AKP are now actually more supportive, because they also don't like Gülen movement, and actually this whole tension might be creating new alliances for AKP rather than weaken it at the vote level.
All right. Some of the viewers weighing in on this, by the way. One saying, why doesn't the EU talk about what's happening in Hamburg, where there's been oppression of Turkish migrants? They never miss a chance to smear Erdogan and Turkey, and we see that. Let me ask you, Benjamin Bruce. So we see that there's two arguments as we head in this electoral cycle. On the one hand, there's the one that Bahadir described, which is what's going to happen with growth, what's going to happen to the management of the growth. On the other hand, there's the one that Zia described, which is this debate between Islamists, between conservatives. What's at the core of that debate? Is it personalities, or is there a real ideological rift, you might say, within the ruling AKP?
Well, the debate at the core of between different Islamist groupings, you mean? In that sense, it's something that's not new at all to Turkey. It's something that's existed the entire time that the movement from which the AKP party has come, which was the Milli Görüş movement, the National Vision movement, it already had many problems with other different Islamist or Islamic-inspired currents, whether they be Nursi, Naqshbandi, whether they be different types of Sufi movements. So it's never been a unified movement under the rubric of Islam. So within that entire rubric of Islam, one can find many different tendencies, even, and we haven't mentioned Alevis tonight, who would usually vote for more center-left parties, are under the rubric Islam at times and can also be though very rarely, AKP members. So there's no way to just say Islam and understand an entire current of thought in Turkey. So what we're witnessing, as the other guest was saying, was maybe a change of different alliances. For instance, earlier in the 80s, when we had a party that had a majority government and had the support of a very large amount of the population, as is the case now, the support was not coming during the entire decade of the 80s from just what we call the Islamists. They were to some extent integrated into this center-right party, the ANAP, the Anavatan Partisi, but they also received party from many of the different Sufi-inspired movements who saw in this center-right party a party that would leave them alone, that would let them do what they would like to do, and thus they would also advise their members to vote for them. So they did not push, on the one hand, for a more Islamist, quote-unquote, party like we would.
So what's the
today.
trend today?
The trend today is, as I think everyone's been saying, it's a very big question mark with everything that has happened in the last days. I think it is also fascinating to see, for instance, this question of authority and ultimate authority, the winner-takes-all democracy. Well, the Ministry of the Interior and Ministry of Justice, both of whom were just replaced, issued this, it was already mentioned a few moments ago, issued a statement saying that all police officers would have to report to their superiors if they were to start any new investigations. This was shot down categorically by the highest administrative court in the country, which means that we cannot talk of one sole authority figure, one sole power in Turkey. At least if it were to change, it will be much more down the road. And I think the fact that the military, again, has issued a statement saying that they're watching carefully, but they're not taking any positions. They remain an actor, but they remain nowhere near to the degree implicated as in the last 60, 70, 80 years of the entire Turkish Republic.
All right, so institutions being put to the test, the outcome uncertain as to who's going to come ahead. Turkey's currency also being put to the test. The lira hitting another new record low on Monday. It has rebounded since. Ratings agency Fitch, though, warning Tuesday of strains on institutional integrity. I guess that's code for watch out. Other ratings agencies are looking at Turkey's long-term credit worthiness, and stocks have slumped since December 17th. The benchmark index down some 8%. What's the short-term outlook, Bahadir Kaliagasi, when we know that, the municipal elections aren't until March? What's the short-term outlook for Turkey's stocks and Turkey's economy?
Well, this government has been, in the last decade, very successful in maintaining the macroeconomic discipline despite the electoral years. Turkey is a country which is that is almost meeting the Maastricht criteria of the European Union, except the inflation criterion.
But can investors stomach it all until the elections?
Well, probably those investors which have confidence in themselves and analytical capabilities on understanding Turkey, they will continue their investments. But those which are less big and which have not yet accumulated a good knowledge of Turkey, they will probably be reluctant and wait for the results of the elections and try to see whether Turkey will be in more political instability or not. But this happens almost any time when there are elections in any country. The elections are there, and they have to happen, as we cannot avoid them. The most important indicators will be, once more, the volatility or not of the Turkish lira and of the interest rates, and the way the current account deficit of Turkey will be managed. We don't expect that macroeconomic discipline will be lost. We expect that the economic growth will be slightly less than expected. The central bank will have to be very proactive to keep the inflation target by the end of the year stable, and also probably as a result of these interventions, we will have a domestic market which will be reduced in its size relatively, of course, which with positive implications, consequences on the current account deficit. Okay. And also better exports, but the investor confidence will not may be stable or less, but this year will certainly not be a year of boom in foreign direct investment.
All right, don't expect silly season, you're saying, on the part of investors and decision makers at places like the central bank. I want to thank our panel for joining us here. This, of course, an issue that we're going to continue to follow. I want to thank Emre Demir, Benjamin Bruce in Brussels, Bahadir Kaliagasi, and in London, Zia Maral. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.